Lena and I had been together for 10 years. 10 years is a long time. It's not just a number in a passport or the count of New Year's Eves spent together. It's thousands of cups of coffee brewed in the morning. It's knowing which side of the bed she sleeps on and how she wrinkles her nose when she dislikes something. It's the silent understanding in a crowd of guests when a single glance says, "It's time to go home." Our house was our fortress. I designed it myself, a 2-story building with panoramic windows overlooking a small but perfectly manicured garden that Lena tended to. I am an architect, a man of lines, forms, and functions. For me, this house was the pinnacle of my career, the embodiment of stability and success. Everything in it was in its place, from the minimalist Italian furniture to the collection of black and white photographs on the walls that we brought back from our travels. That evening, like many others, we were sitting on the terrace. The warm August air was filled with the scent of petunias and night-scented stock. Red wine swirled in our glasses. Lena was talking about her work. She was a lawyer at a large firm, and her world consisted of contracts, lawsuits, and corporate intrigue. I was half listening, nodding, and inserting standard phrases. "Yes, you're right. They were unfair." My thoughts were far away. They were at the construction site of a new project, the ambitious Horizon Business Center, which was set to become the jewel of our city and my personal pride. "Are you even listening to me?" Lena's voice pulled me from my reverie. "Yes, of course," I started. "You were talking about the merger." She sighed and set her glass down. Her gaze was weary. It had been that way for the past few months. Dark circles under her eyes that even skillful makeup couldn't hide, and a barely noticeable crease of bitterness at the corners of her lips. "I was saying that I might be made a partner if this deal goes through." "Lena, that's amazing." I tried to feign sincere enthusiasm. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? We should celebrate." "Because you wouldn't have heard," she replied quietly, staring into the darkness of the garden. "Lately, you don't hear anything but your horizon." The jab of guilt was precise and painful. She was right. For the last 6 months, I had been living and breathing this project. I fell asleep with blueprints in my head and woke up with new ideas. I brought work home, spreading sketches on the dining table, ignoring her attempts to talk about something else. I was obsessed. "I'm sorry," I said, covering her hand with mine. Her skin was cool. "I'm very proud of you, really. You deserve this more than anyone." She gave a faint smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you." When it was over, she turned to the wall. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, feeling empty and infinitely lonely. In our perfect house, in our perfect bed, next to the woman I once loved madly, I was alone. And the scariest part was, I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know if I even wanted to. We sat in silence for a little longer. It wasn't comfortable like it used to be. It was ringing, filled with unspoken things. We were each lost in our own thoughts. She, in her career, the partnership, the years sacrificed for success. I, in my project, the glass and concrete, the lines reaching for the sky. We were side by side, but a chasm lay between us. Later in bed, I pulled her close. My touches were familiar, honed over the years. I knew how to please her, knew every sensitive spot on her body, but it felt like performing a well-rehearsed play. Technically flawless, but soulless. The spark was gone, that all-consuming desire that used to make us forget everything else. We were making love, but there was no intimacy. The next day, a new phase of work on Horizon began. Landscape design. I had always considered this part of the project secondary. My element was the framework, the structure, the interior space. Gardens, squares, fountains. To me, they were just beautiful wrapping, a pleasant addition. But the client, an eccentric millionaire, obsessed with ecology and feng shui, insisted that the area around the business center be not just a green zone, but a work of art. A separate firm was hired for this, and its representative, the lead designer, was her. Kira. She walked into my office, and the air seemed to crackle with electricity. Tall, with a mane of fiery red hair gathered in a messy bun. She wore simple jeans, a white shirt, and rugged boots, but carried herself with royal dignity. But the main thing was her eyes, green, like forest moss after rain. They danced with mischief, but behind it, one could sense depth and a kind of hidden sadness. "Alexei, I'm Kira. We'll be turning your concrete jungle into an oasis together," she said, extending her hand. Her voice was low with a slight rasp. Her handshake was firm, confident. We spread the master plan on the huge table. I began to explain my concept, the flow of people, the functional zones. She listened attentively, without interrupting, only occasionally making notes in her notebook. "I see," she said when I finished. "Functional, logical, and completely soulless." I was stunned. No one had ever spoken about my work like that. "What do you mean?" "You think like an architect, in straight lines. I think like nature, in curves, asymmetry, chaos that has its own harmony. Your people will leave this glass anthill and enter another one, only green. Neatly trimmed lawns, trees in a row. This isn't an oasis. It's a parade ground." Her criticism was sharp, but there was no malice in it. There was passion. She believed in what she was saying. "And what do you suggest?" I asked, feeling a mix of irritation and curiosity bubble up inside me. "I suggest creating a story, a place where a person can breathe out, where around a bend in the path they'll find not another identical bench, but a secluded, ivy-covered gazebo, where instead of the monotonous sound of a fountain, they'll hear the murmur of a stream flowing among wild stones. I want people to forget they're in the center of a metropolis." She spoke, and I could see these images appearing before her mind's eye. Her hands fluttered over the plan, drawing invisible paths and hills in the air. She was an artist, and her canvas was the earth. We argued for several hours that day. I defended my logic, she her philosophy. I talked about budgets and deadlines, she about seasons and the color of leaves in autumn, and at some point I caught myself enjoying it. I liked her drive, her passion, her ability to see the world differently. With her, I felt alive, not a function, not a cog in the machine, but a creator. We started meeting almost every day. Work meetings smoothly transitioned into lunches together, and then dinners. We talked about the project, but more and more, we talked about life. She told me about her childhood in a small seaside town, about collecting herbariums and dreaming of creating parks. I told her about my student dreams, about unrealized projects, about how routine and commerce gradually push creativity out of the profession. She listened in a way no one had listened to me for a long time. She didn't just hear the words, she grasped the essence. She understood my fears and doubts. With her, I could be myself. Not the successful architect Alexei Romanov, but just Alex. One evening we stayed late at the office, finishing a complex part of the project. It was raining outside. We ordered pizza and opened a bottle of wine I kept in my cabinet for special occasions. "Are you happy?" I asked, surprising myself. She was silent for a long time, watching the raindrops dance on the window pane. "I don't know," she finally answered. "I have a job I love. I have friends. But sometimes I come back to my empty apartment, and such a wave of melancholy washes over me that I want to howl. What about you? Are you happy?" I looked at her. In the dim light of the office, her hair seemed darker, and her eyes bottomless. And I answered honestly for the first time in a long time, "I don't know either." In that moment, something more than just a professional relationship sparked between us. It was a fragile, barely perceptible thread of mutual understanding, woven from the loneliness of two people who had met in the middle of a huge city. And I felt that thread pulling me towards her with an irresistible force. Driving home that evening, I felt as if I had committed a crime, although nothing had happened. We had just talked. But this frankness with what was essentially a stranger felt like a betrayal to Lena. She was waiting for me, sitting in the living room with a book, but I could see she wasn't reading. "You're late," she said without looking up. "Work." Got held up with the landscape designers. I tossed out, taking off my jacket. "Again? You're held up with them every day." "It's a complex project. The client is demanding. You know how it is." I went over and kissed the top of her head. She didn't pull away, but she didn't respond to the affection either. She was like a porcelain doll, beautiful, cold, motionless. "I had dinner alone," she said. "Sorry. I should have called." "You should have," she echoed. I went to take a shower, hoping the hot water would wash away the sticky feeling of guilt and the strange excitement I felt after my conversation with Kira. But it was no use. Her face, her green eyes, her understanding smile were imprinted in my mind. That night I lay next to Lena and thought about Kira. I imagined the scent of her hair, the sound of her laugh. I felt like a teenager with his first crush, and I was ashamed of my thoughts, of my desires. I was a grown, successful man. I had a wife, a home, a settled life. What was I doing? I tried to fight it. I tried to limit my interactions with Kira to purely work-related matters. In meetings, I was deliberately dry and formal. I declined joint lunches, citing busyness. She understood everything. She would look at me with her piercing gaze, and I felt as if she could see right through me. But she didn't push. She accepted my rules of the game, and that only made it worse. I missed her. I missed our conversations, her laughter, the feeling of lightness that came with being around her. My life became a series of contrasts. During the day, intense work, formal meetings with Kira where we both pretended nothing was between us. In the evening, returning to my perfect but empty home, to my perfect but distant wife. The tension grew. I became irritable, snapping at my subordinates, arguing with Lena over trivial things. One day she couldn't take it anymore. "What's going on with you, Alex? You're not yourself. You've become distant. If you're having problems at work, just tell me. We've always shared everything." We were standing in the kitchen. She had just come home, still in her formal business suit. I looked at her and saw a beautiful, smart, strong woman. The woman who was my wife. And I couldn't tell her the truth. I couldn't tell her I was thinking about someone else. "Everything's fine," I lied. "Just tired. The project is draining." "It's not just the project," she shook her head. "It's us. Do you remember the last time we just went for a walk in the park? Or to the movies? Or made love because we wanted each other, not because we should?" Her words hit me hard. She had voiced everything I had been thinking, but was afraid to admit to myself. "I don't know, Lena. Maybe it's just a phase, a crisis. Everyone goes through it." "And what are we going to do about this crisis? Wait for it to pass on its own?" "What do you suggest?" "I suggest we talk. Really talk. Without excuses about work. Let's go somewhere for the weekend, just the two of us. A change of scenery." It was a reasonable suggestion. It was the right thing to do. Any psychologist would say it was the only way to save our marriage. And I agreed. "Okay, let's go." We booked a cabin by a lake, a couple of hours' drive from the city. A place where we had once spent one of the most romantic weekends at the beginning of our relationship. I tried to get myself in the right mindset. I remembered how happy we were then. I tried to resurrect those feelings within me. But on Friday, a few hours before we were supposed to leave, Kira called me. "Alex, I have an emergency." Her voice was anxious. "The contractors brought the wrong stones for the rock garden. They're huge. The crane can't lift them. The project calls for medium-sized boulders. If we don't solve this now, we'll miss all the deadlines. Can you come to the site?" I looked at the clock, then at the bag packed for the trip. "Kira, I can't. I'm leaving town for the weekend." "Please," her voice pleaded. "It won't take more than an hour. I just need your authoritative word to make them take this monstrosity back and bring what's needed. They won't listen to me without you." "Alex, I have an emergency." Her voice was anxious. "The contractors brought the wrong stones for the rock garden. They're huge. The crane can't lift them. The project calls for medium-sized boulders. If we don't solve this now, we'll miss all the deadlines. Can you come to the site?" I looked at the clock, then at the bag packed for the trip. "Kira, I can't. I'm leaving town for the weekend." "Please," her voice pleaded. "It won't take more than an hour. I just need your authoritative word to make them take this monstrosity back and bring what's needed. They won't listen to me without you." I hesitated. I knew I should say no. I should go with Lena. This was our chance. But I pictured Kira, alone, flustered on a huge construction site, fighting with stubborn workers, and I couldn't refuse her. "Okay, I'll be there." I called Lena. "Honey, there's a last-minute emergency at work. I have to go to the site urgently. I'll be delayed by an hour, maybe two. You go ahead, I'll catch up." "Alex, we had an agreement." "I know. I'm sorry. This is really important. I'll be quick." I hung up before she could argue. I was lying to her, and I was lying to myself. I knew it wouldn't take an hour, and I knew I wasn't just going there to solve the problem with the stones. I was going because I wanted to see her. The construction site greeted me with the roar of machinery and clouds of dust. Kira was standing by a pile of giant granite boulders, gesturing furiously and arguing with a grim-faced foreman. When she saw me, she rushed over. "Thank God you're here. They're saying the invoices list this exact item." Her cheeks were flushed. A strand of red hair had escaped her bun and stuck to her damp forehead. She was beautiful in her anger. It took me half an hour to sort out the situation, check the documents, and get the foreman to admit the mistake. When the trucks loaded with the wrong stones finally left, Kira leaned wearily against the wall of a site hut. Thank you. You saved me. Any time, I said, trying to keep my voice casual. I have to go now. My wife is waiting for me. I had already turned to leave, but she stopped me. Wait, let me at least buy you a coffee at that cafe on the corner. 5 minutes. And again, I couldn't say no. We sat at a small table by the window. She drank her espresso. I had an Americano. We were silent. The tension between us was thick enough to cut with a knife. Why are you doing this, Alex? She finally asked, looking me straight in the eye. Doing what? Keeping me at a distance, acting like I'm a leper. I can see something is happening between us, and you see it too. I have a wife, I answered numbly. I know, and I'm not asking you to leave her. I'm not asking for anything. I just want to understand what this is. Why am I so drawn to you? And why, when you're near, do I feel like I can finally breathe? Her words were like an electric shock. She had voiced everything I felt myself. I don't know, I whispered. Well, I think I do. She leaned across the table. We are two lonely people who accidentally found each other in this huge city, and we're afraid to admit it to ourselves. She reached out and covered my hand with hers. Her touch was like a burn. I didn't pull my hand away. I sat there looking at our intertwined fingers and realized I had crossed a line. The point of no return had been passed. I don't remember how we ended up at her place. I only remember the elevator, the ringing silence in my ears, the pounding of my own heart. Her apartment was like her, a little chaotic, filled with light and greenery. There were pots with exotic plants everywhere, watercolor landscapes on the walls, and stacks of books on art and gardening on the floor. She turned to me in the hallway. You can still leave, she said quietly. But I knew I wouldn't. I stepped toward her and kissed her. It wasn't a gentle, timid kiss. It was a kiss of desperation and hunger, like two thirsty travelers who had found a spring. We kissed for a long, fierce time, trying to make up for all the time we had held back. Her hands tangled in my hair. Mine clutched her waist, pulling her close. I didn't go to Lena that night. I called her and said the problems at the site were more serious than I thought, and I had to stay in the city. I lied, looking into Kira's green, pool-like eyes, and felt nothing but all-consuming desire. Our first night was insane. We couldn't get enough of each other. We talked nonstop and then made love again and again. With her, I was different. Not a restrained, respectable husband, but a wild, primal male. She awakened something in me that had been dormant for years. In the morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee. She was standing at the stove in one of my shirts, humming to herself. The sunlight played in her red hair, and in that moment I felt a pang of such sharp, piercing happiness that it scared me. I left before the city fully woke up. The drive home was a blur. I was on autopilot, a single thought pounding in my head. What have I done? Lena met me at the door of the country house. She was pale, her eyes red from crying. Where have you been? I called you all night. You didn't pick up. I was going out of my mind. My battery died. I lied again, avoiding her eyes. I told you there were problems. Had to call an emergency crew. She looked at me for a long, scrutinizing moment. I thought she would see the traces of another woman's hands on me, smell another woman's perfume. But she just sighed wearily. Fine, let's drop it. I'm glad it's all sorted out. Go have breakfast. The weekend was torture. I was with Lena, but my mind was with Kira. I smiled, made conversation, helped her in the garden, all the while replaying every word, every moan, every touch from the night before. Lena, seeing my distant state, attributed it to fatigue and work problems. She tried to be caring, surrounding me with attention, but her concern only provoked irritation and guilt in me. I had become a stranger in my own home, in my own life. A double life began, agonizing, exhausting, yet intoxicating. I was torn between two women, two worlds. The world with Lena was one of duty and habit. It consisted of shared dinners, visiting friends, discussing household problems. It was stability, predictability, a quiet harbor that increasingly resembled a swamp. I played the role of a loving husband, but felt like an actor in a bad play. Every touch, every kiss felt like a dull ache in my heart. I was betraying her every second, even when just sitting next to her on the couch. But another part of me couldn't stop. The adrenaline, the risk, the forbidden fruit, it was all like a drug. I felt more alive than ever before. One day, Kira and I drove out of town to an abandoned quarry with turquoise water. We swam naked, lay on the warm rocks, and drank wine from the bottle. "I love you," she said, looking at the clouds. The words sounded so simple and natural, and I realized it was true. I loved her too. Not just desired her, not just valued her as a friend. I loved her. "I love you too," I replied. And it was the most terrifying and honest thing I had said in months. The thought of leaving Lena began to cross my mind more often. I imagined what my life with Kira would be like. Waking up together every morning, traveling, making plans. The picture was so alluring. But then I would come home, I'd see Lena bustling in the kitchen, making my favorite dinner. I'd see our photos together on the walls. I'd remember everything we had been through, her support when I was just starting my career, our shared victories and defeats, and I knew I couldn't just erase 10 years of my life. I couldn't cause her that much pain. She didn't deserve it. I was stuck between two women, between the past and the future, between duty and desire, and this internal conflict was tearing me apart. The longer my double life continued, the stranger Lena's behavior became. I expected suspicion, scenes of jealousy, interrogations, but there was none of that. Instead, she became distant, withdrawn into herself. She used to always be interested in my work, asking about Horizon. Now, she stopped asking questions. When I came home late, she didn't ask where I'd been. She would just nod and go to the bedroom. She started staying late at work more often, citing preparations for that merger. Sometimes she would go to her parents' or a friend's for the weekend, which she rarely did before. At first, I attributed it to her own problems, to the stress of the potential partnership. I even felt a sense of relief. Her distance gave me more freedom, more opportunities to see Kira. My conscience, lulled by her behavior, was almost silent. I convinced myself that we each had our own lives, our own difficult periods, and that was normal. We had just grown apart, but later, when things settled down, we would be close again. I lied to myself as easily as I lied to her, but one day, something happened that put me on alert. I came home earlier than usual. Lena was supposed to have an important meeting, and I was sure she wasn't home. I quietly entered the house and heard her voice from the living room. She was talking to someone on the phone. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but her tone made me freeze in the hallway. She was laughing. It wasn't her usual restrained laugh. It was a happy, carefree laugh, the kind I hadn't heard in years. "No, he doesn't suspect a thing. He's too absorbed in his project. And his fairy..." She laughed again. "Yes, everything is going according to plan. Don't worry, it will all be over soon. I miss you too. A lot. Kisses." I stood there, thunderstruck. What did that mean? What plan? What fairy? Did she know about Kira? But then why was she so calm? And who was she talking to so affectionately? I quickly and silently left the house, got in my car, and drove away. My heart was pounding like a drum. Jealousy, fear, confusion, it all swirled in my head. All evening, I replayed her words in my mind. He doesn't suspect a thing. Everything is going according to plan. It will all be over soon. It sounded like a conspiracy, but against whom? Against me? I returned home late, feigning exhaustion. Lena greeted me as if nothing had happened. "Hi. Tired?" "Yeah, crazy day." I looked at her, trying to find any hint of deceit in her face, but she was perfectly calm. She was a great actress, or I was just going crazy with paranoia, born from my own lies. From that day on, I started watching her. I checked her phone when she was in the shower, but it was clean, no suspicious calls or messages. I tried to check her browser history on her laptop, but it was deleted. She was careful, too careful. I hired a private detective. I was ashamed. I felt like the lowest scum, but I had to know the truth. A week later, the detective sent me a report, a few photos. In them, Lena was having lunch at a restaurant with some man. They were laughing. He was holding her hand. In another photo, they were leaving the entrance of an apartment building, not ours. I looked at the pictures and the ground fell out from under me. I was being deceived. Led by the nose, all her distance, her business trips, her late nights at work, it was all a lie. She had someone else. My first reaction was rage. How could she? I wasn't blameless myself, of course, But this was different. I was betraying her, tormented by guilt. But she, it turned out, was doing the same thing, but coldly, calculatingly, laughing in my face. Everything is going according to plan. I wanted to storm into the house, throw these photos in her face, and demand an explanation, but something stopped me. Her words, and his fairy. She knew about Kira, but how and why hadn't she said anything? I realized that everything was much more complicated than it seemed. This wasn't just a simple case of mutual infidelity. This was some kind of game, and I didn't know the rules, and I decided not to reveal my hand just yet. I decided to play along, to see what would happen next. Living with the knowledge that you're being deceived while pretending nothing is wrong is torture. I now examined her every gesture, every word under a microscope. Her care seemed fake, her smiles poisonous. Our home was no longer a fortress. It had become a battlefield where a quiet, invisible war was being waged. I continued to see Kira, but even those meetings lost their lightness. My thoughts were consumed by Lena. I told Kira about my suspicions. She knows about us, I said as we sat in her apartment, and she has someone. How do you know? She tensed up. I heard her conversation, hired a detective. There are pictures. I expected sympathy, support from her, but her reaction was strange. She grew somber, looked away. Maybe you're mistaken. Maybe it's just a friend or a colleague. They were holding hands, Kira, and coming out of someone else's apartment. Alex, don't jump to conclusions, she said, somewhat uncertainly. You're not in the best position to be accusing anyone right now. Maybe you should just talk to her. Her words angered me. Talk to her. And what would I say? Darling, I'm cheating on you, but it seems you're doing the same and it's pissing me off. That's absurd. Then what are you going to do? I'm going to wait. I want to understand what she's up to. She said, everything is going according to plan. I want to find out what that plan is. Kira sighed and hugged me. Be careful, please. Her concern seemed genuine. I attributed her strange reaction to shock and confusion. She loved me and was afraid for me. At least that's what I wanted to believe. Meanwhile, work on Horizon was nearing completion. The main construction was finished, and now all attention was on the landscape. Kira's design was magnificent. She was truly creating an oasis. Winding paths, a stream with cascades, secluded corners with unusual plants. Even I, a man of straight lines, was impressed. But strange things started happening here too. A batch of rare saplings would suddenly disappear. Someone would damage the automatic irrigation system, or errors would creep into the project documentation, leading to costly rework. It all looked like a series of unfortunate accidents, but there were too many of them. Kira was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. She spent her days and nights on the site, trying to control everything. I helped her as much as I could. These problems brought us even closer. We were like two soldiers in the same trench. One evening, after another crisis, we sat in her car, completely exhausted. It feels like someone is deliberately sabotaging my work, she said, dropping her head onto the steering wheel. Who would do that? I asked. I don't know. I have competitors who also bid for this project. Maybe it's them? This version seemed plausible. I advised her to increase security and be more careful with the documents. But deep down, another suspicion stirred within me. Too many things were happening at once. Problems in my family life, problems on the project that was so important to me and Kira. Weren't these all links in the same chain? Parts of the same plan? I decided to check on the man Lena was photographed with. The detective found out his name. Igor Somov. He was the owner of a small construction company. I looked up his firm in the databases, and what I found made my blood run cold. Somov's company was one of the subcontractors on our project. They were responsible for supplying the very saplings that had disappeared and installing the very irrigation system that had broken down. The puzzle started to come together. This wasn't revenge from Kira's competitors. It was sabotage, organized by my wife's lover. But why? Just to hurt me by hitting my most important project? Or was the goal bigger? And the main question, did Kira know who was behind all these problems? Her reaction to my suspicions, her advice to not jump to conclusions, was she also part of this plan? The thought was monstrous. I pushed it away. I loved this woman. I trusted her. She couldn't do this to me. I decided to talk to her directly. I went to her place unannounced. She opened the door, surprised to see me. Alex, did something happen? I walked into the apartment and silently handed her a printout with information about Igor Somov's company. She took the sheet, her eyes scanning it. I watched her face closely, trying to catch any shadow of surprise or indignation, but her face was unreadable. I don't see what this has to do with anything, she said in an even voice. This company is our subcontractor. Its owner is my wife's lover, and all the problems are happening on their section of the work. Doesn't that seem strange to you? She was silent, looking away. Kira, look at me. I took her by the shoulders, forcing her to turn. Did you know about this? Did you know who he was? She lifted her eyes to mine. They held pain, fear, and something else I couldn't understand. Yes, she whispered. I knew. The world collapsed. The air left my lungs. I recoiled from her as if she were a leper. You knew and you said nothing? You watched me go crazy with suspicion? Watched yourself tear your hair out over these accidents? And you said nothing? Alex, I couldn't tell you. I was scared. Scared? What were you scared of? Or are you in on it with them? Is this all part of your grand plan? To put on this show, make me fall in love with you, and then destroy me? No! She cried, tears streaming down her cheeks. No, it's not like that. I really love you. Love me. I laughed a bitter, dry laugh. Your love is a lie. Everything between us was a lie. Please listen to me. She stepped toward me, trying to take my hand, but I pulled away. I don't want to hear anything. I turned and walked to the door. Alex, don't go! She yelled after me. It's not what you think. Lena, she made me do it. Her last words made me freeze at the threshold. What? She was blackmailing me. Kira sobbed, struggling to find the words. She had dirt on my father. He's a doctor. Years ago, he made a mistake that cost a patient their life. It was covered up, but Lena had proof. She threatened to destroy him if I didn't help her. I listened, unable to believe my ears. It sounded like the plot of a cheap thriller. Lena, my quiet, reserved Lena, and blackmail? What did she want from you? She wanted me to seduce you, to make you fall head over heels in love with me, to make you ready to leave her. It was supposed to be her revenge. She wanted you to destroy your own life, and then she would tell you it was all a setup. And the sabotage at the construction site? Was that her idea too? No, that was Igor. Lena's lover. He hates you. Apparently you two have some old score to settle. He convinced Lena that they needed to destroy not just your family, but your career too. I was against it. I tried to stop them, but they wouldn't listen. I sat on the sofa, my head in my hands. The information wouldn't sink in. My wife, whom I had betrayed, turned out to be a vengeful monster. The woman I loved turned out to be a pawn in someone else's game. And I was just an idiot, a puppet in this theater. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked, staring into space. I was afraid for my father, and I was afraid of losing you. I hoped I could somehow fix everything, that Lena would come to her senses, but it only got worse every day, and then I realized that I really love you, and it didn't matter how it all started. I just wanted to be with you. She knelt before me, resting her head on my lap. Forgive me, Alex, please forgive me. I looked at her red hair, her trembling shoulders. I didn't know what to feel. Anger, pity, disappointment, love. It all tangled into a tight knot. She had deceived me, but she was a victim, just like me. We were both pawns in Lena's game, and in that moment I knew what I had to do. I would no longer be a victim. I would enter this game, and I would win. I came home late that night. Lena was asleep. I quietly entered the bedroom and looked at her. Her calm, serene face showed no trace of the demons that, as it turned out, lived in her soul. Who was this woman I had lived with for 10 years? I realized I didn't know her at all. I decided it was time to end this charade. In the morning, at breakfast, I was unusually cheerful. Darling, I was thinking, I began, spreading butter on my toast. We haven't been out anywhere in so long, and the work on Horizon is almost finished. Let's throw a party to celebrate the project's completion, right here at our house. We'll invite everyone who took part. Lena looked up at me in surprise. A party? That's unexpected. Why not? We need to celebrate. I'll invite all the management, all the contractors, and the landscape designers, of course. Kira, she did a huge amount of work. At the mention of Kira's name, she tensed slightly, but quickly composed herself. That's a good idea, she said with a smile. I'll help you organize everything. Great. And one more thing. I want you to invite your friend, Igor. This time, she couldn't hide her shock. Her hand holding the coffee cup trembled. Igor? How did you... He's our subcontractor. It would be rude not to invite him. I looked her straight in the eye, smiling the most innocent smile. She quickly recovered from the shock. Yes, of course, you're right. I'll invite him. The game was on. The next few days were spent preparing for the party. It was surreal. Lena and I made the guest list together, chose the menu, discussed the decorations. We looked like the perfect couple getting ready to entertain. But behind our smiles and polite phrases lay a knowledge that could blow this house apart. I met with Kira. I told her I believed her, that we were in this together. I told her about my plan. Are you crazy? She said, frightened. This is dangerous. You don't know what they're capable of. And I want to find out. I want all the masks to come off this Saturday in front of everyone. What have you planned? You'll see. Just trust me and come to the party. The day arrived. The house was full of guests, architects, builders, investors, the entire elite of our city. Soft music played, waiters served champagne and appetizers. Lena was the perfect hostess, charming, smiling, in an elegant black dress. By her side, like a faithful page, was Igor Somov, tall, self-assured, with a predatory smile. He looked at me with poorly concealed contempt. Kira arrived. She was pale but held herself with confidence. She came up to me. I'm scared, she whispered. Don't be. I'm here. I squeezed her hand reassuringly. Lena and Igor noticed the gesture. They exchanged a look. Their faces were triumphant. They thought their plan had worked, that I had fallen into their trap. When all the guests had gathered, I took a glass and asked for silence. Friends, colleagues, I'm happy to welcome you all to our home. Today, we celebrate the completion of a grand project, Horizon. This is our shared victory. But today, I want to talk about more than just that. Today, I want to make an important announcement concerning my personal life. All eyes were on me. Lena and Igor froze in anticipation. They thought I was about to announce my divorce and that I was leaving for Kira. Many of you know how long my wife Lena and I have been together, 10 years. But unfortunately, all things must come to an end. Our paths have diverged, and I have met another woman. A woman I love and with whom I want to spend my life. I paused, scanning the silent guests. Then I turned, looked at Kira, who stood beside me, pale as a sheet. And I shifted my gaze to Lena. But that woman is not Kira. A deafening silence fell over the room. Lena's face fell. Igor frowned. I don't know what you're talking about, Lena stammered. Oh, I think you know perfectly well. I smirked. You arranged this whole thing yourself, your brilliant plan for revenge, the blackmail, the sabotage on the construction site. Did you think I wouldn't find out? I took a voice recorder from my pocket and pressed the button. The room filled with Kira's voice, tearfully telling me the whole truth about Lena's plan and her blackmail. I had recorded our conversation that night. She confessed everything. The guests gasped. Everyone stared at Lena, who had turned as white as a sheet. It's a lie, she screamed. She's lying. He forced her to say it. Really? I turned to Igor. Perhaps you could tell us, Mr. Somov, about your fraudulent supply schemes? I have copies of the invoices and witness statements. I think the prosecutor's office would be very interested. Igor backed away, looking for an exit. And finally, the most interesting part, I turned back to Lena. You thought you were getting revenge on me, but for what? For cheating on you? No. Your hatred runs much deeper. For a long time I couldn't understand why, and then I remembered. 10 years ago, when I was just starting my career, I had a competitor, a talented guy. We were both bidding for a major project. And I set him up. I made it so his project was deemed unsuitable. I was young and ambitious. I didn't think about the consequences. That guy's name was Dmitry Volkov, your brother. Lena looked at me with such hatred that if looks could kill, I would have been dead on the floor. You broke his life, she hissed. He never recovered after that. He started drinking, lost everything. And you built your brilliant career on his bones. I swore I would get revenge, that I would take away everything you hold dear. Your career, your reputation, your home. And you almost succeeded, I admitted. But you overlooked one thing. You underestimated me, and you overestimated your accomplices. I looked at Kira, who stood with her face in her hands. She told me everything. Because unlike you, she has a conscience. and because she really fell in love with me. And I fell in love with her. I went to Kira, hugged her, and looked my wife in the eyes. So yes, I'm leaving. But not because your plan worked, but because I choose love, not hate. I choose truth, not lies. Goodbye, Lena. I took Kira's hand, and we walked towards the exit, leaving behind the ruins of my past life and the stunned guests who had witnessed the finale of this drama. We walked out of the house into the deafening silence of the August night. The air, which had seemed warm and gentle just moments before, was now cold and biting. Behind us, in the brightly lit windows, the silhouettes of people stood frozen. The show was over. We got into the car. Kira was trembling. I started the engine, but we sat in silence for a few more minutes, looking at the house that was no longer mine. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. "Somewhere, far away from here," I answered. I drove without paying attention to the road. The city lights gave way to the darkness of the country highway. We drove through the night, and this road to nowhere seemed like the only salvation. I felt empty. The victory brought no joy. It left only bitterness and ashes behind. I had destroyed everything: my family, my career, my reputation. Tomorrow, this story would be the top news in all architectural and business circles. Blackmail, sabotage, infidelity, revenge, the perfect cocktail for a scandal. But I had no regrets. I had shed the weight of lies that had been crushing me for months. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe freely. "Do you really love me?" Kira asked quietly, breaking the silence. "Or was that also part of your plan? To say that to hurt Lena more?" I pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned off the engine. There was only the forest and the starry sky around us. "When I found out the truth, I hated you," I admitted honestly. "I felt betrayed. But then I realized that you were a hostage in the situation yourself, and I remembered everything that had been between us. Not the meetings orchestrated by Lena, but our real conversations, our laughter, our intimacy. You can't fake that. And I realized that my feelings for you are real. I love you, Kira." She started to cry, quietly, silently. I pulled her close, and she buried her face in my shoulder. "I love you too," she whispered. "But what happens now? I don't know. We'll start from scratch." We spent the night in a small roadside motel. It was a strange night. We didn't make love. We just lay there holding each other and talked. We talked about everything that had built up, about her fear, about my guilt, about our uncertain future. And that night, full of honesty and vulnerability, brought us closer than all our passionate encounters. In the morning, a new world began, a world where I had nothing but the woman lying next to me and a glimmer of hope. The divorce from Lena was quick and messy. We divided property, accounts, friends. She tried to sue me for everything, but the evidence of her machinations that I provided to my lawyers cooled her fervor. We parted as enemies. Igor Somov was brought to justice for fraud. His company went bankrupt. My career was ruined. The client for Horizon, upon learning of the scandal, terminated my contract. No one wanted to do business with an architect with such a reputation. I had to leave my own firm, which I had built brick by brick. Kira and I rented a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. It was very difficult at first. I, accustomed to luxury and success, was learning to live on a modest income. I looked for work, but was rejected everywhere. Kira also left her firm. She couldn't work in a place that reminded her of the whole story. She took on small private jobs, designing gardens for country houses. Her earnings were barely enough to live on. There were moments of despair. We argued, blamed each other, took out our frustrations. Sometimes I thought we wouldn't make it, that this new life built on the ruins of the old one was also doomed. But we held on to each other. We were all we had left. We learned to trust each other again. We talked about the past, about our mistakes, about the pain we had caused others and ourselves, and it was cleansing. One day, I was sitting over some blueprints. I had decided to go back to where I started, private projects. I was sketching a small, cozy house, the kind of house one would want to live in. Not for status, not for glossy magazines, but for oneself. Kira came up behind me and wrapped her arms around my shoulders. "What's this?" she asked. "This is our home," I replied. "Someday we'll build it." She smiled, "And next to it will be a garden with wild stones and a stream." I turned to her and kissed her, and in that kiss there was no passion, no desperation. There was tenderness. There was the certainty that we were on the right path. The path was long and difficult, but we walked it together. I founded a small architectural firm. Kira and I started working together. I built houses, and she created gardens around them. Our projects weren't as grand as Horizon, but they had soul, and people appreciated that. Gradually, success came to us. A different kind, not as loud as before, quieter, more conscious. We built our home, the very one from my sketches, with the garden Kira had dreamed of. We had children, a red-haired girl with my eyes and a green-eyed boy who looked like Kira. Sometimes, sitting on the terrace of our house in the evening, I would remember my past life, my perfect house, my perfect wife, my perfect career, and I realized that it had all been an illusion, a facade hiding an emptiness. I made many mistakes. I betrayed, I lied, I caused pain. But that story, as ugly as it was, led me to where I was now. It destroyed my life to the foundations so that I could build something real on its ruins. I found my love, my family, myself, and I was happy, truly happy.